In 1991, in the province of Hatay in southern Turkey, a boy named Kemal Atasoy was born into an upper-middle-class Alevi family. His father worked as an accountant, and the family maintained friendships across Turkey's diverse cultural and religious landscape. The Alevi, a Shia Muslim sect forming a minority in Turkey, held varying beliefs about reincarnation, with those in the south-central region particularly embracing the concept of past lives and rebirth. When Kemal was just 2.5 years old, he began speaking about memories that seemed to belong to someone else entirely. His parents listened with tolerant interest as their young son described a life that was not his own. Though aware of Alevi reincarnation beliefs and cases of children with past life memories, they attached little significance to Kemal's statements at first. They made no immediate attempts to verify what he was saying, nor did they discuss his memories much beyond their immediate family circle. The memories Kemal shared were remarkably specific and consistent. He spoke of being an Armenian Christian man named Karakas who had lived in Istanbul some 850 kilometres away from Hatay. He described living in a large 3-storey house at the water's edge, where boats were tied up. Behind his house, he said, stood a church. Most distinctly, he remembered that his house was beside the home of someone called Ayşegül. Kamals Memories painted a picture of a wealthy man who dealt in leather goods and often carried a substantial leather bag. He recalled being married to a woman with a Greek first name and having children who also bore Greek names. He mentioned that people called him Fıstık and that he lived in the house only during part of the year. Perhaps most disturbingly, he remembered being shot with a pistol and suggested that his wife had something to do with his death. He said he had been married in Bodrum, a city on the Turkish coast about 430 kilometres from Istanbul, and that his youngest son had died as a rally car driver. These memories might have remained merely an unusual family story, if not for a chance encounter. Parapsychologist Jürgen Keil, who specialised in researching children with past life memories, learned about Kemal through his interpreter, who happened to know the Atasoy family. When the interpreter mentioned his work with Keil, Kemal's father revealed that his son was just such a child who claimed to remember a previous life. In 1997, when Kemal was 6 years old, Keil and his interpreter visited the Atasoy home to interview the boy. Unlike many reincarnation cases where children have forgotten their memories by the time investigators arrive, Kemal still retained clear recollections of his claimed past life. His mother was present throughout the interview, with his father joining partway through. The interpreter translated Keil's questions at short intervals while Keil took careful notes, choosing not to use audio recordings as he had found cassette recorders often created needless distractions in such sensitive interviews. Keil was particularly impressed by the clarity of Kemal's memories and the confidence with which he expressed them. The boy became the main informant for his own case, providing a detailed list of statements that Keil carefully documented before attempting any verification. This prior written record would prove crucial, as only 33 of the 2,500 cases in Ian Stevenson's files at the Division of Personality Studies had such documentation as of 2005. Kemal also drew attention to a birthmark on his chest, which he said corresponded to the wound from the pistol shot that had killed him in his previous life. His parents hadn't noticed the mark until Kemal began talking about it when he was 3 years old. By the time Keil met him, the birthmark was no longer visible. The verification process began with the most distinctive clue, the name Ayşegül. This proved to be a fortunate detail, as Ayşegül was moderately well known in Turkey as an art dealer who had gotten into legal trouble and fled the country when a court case was opened against her. Using this lead, Kyle travelled to Istanbul to investigate. In the Çengelköy section of Istanbul, a suburb on the Asian shore of the Bosphorus Strait, Kyle located Ayşegül's house. Next to it stood an empty 3-story house that matched Kemal's description perfectly. The house faced the Bosphorus Strait, where boats were moored, and behind it stood a Greek Orthodox church, exactly as Kemal had described. Determining the identity of the house's former occupants proved more challenging. There were no Armenians living in the area at the time of Kyle's investigation, and initially he could find no one who remembered an Armenian living in that particular house. The task was complicated by the fact that about 40 years earlier, more than 300 Greek Orthodox families had lived in the Çengelköy area but had since returned to Greece with no contact information available for any of them. Eventually, Kyle encountered an elderly man who had lived in Çengelköy for many years. This man confirmed that an Armenian had definitely lived in that house at one time. This breakthrough led Kyle to a local historian, born in 1924, who provided crucial additional information. Without revealing what Kemal had said, Kyle asked the historian about the house's occupants. The historian's account aligned remarkably with Kamal's memories. He confirmed that an Armenian Christian man with the family name of Karakas had indeed lived there. The Karakas clan dealt in leather goods, and Karakas often carried a substantial leather bag. His wife came from a Greek Orthodox family who disapproved of the marriage. The couple had 3 children. Most significantly, the historian stated that Karakas died in 1940 or 1941, and there was talk that Karakas's wife had something to do with his death. On a subsequent visit to Istanbul, Kyle met with elderly men who recalled that the house had been in the possession of Karakas's wife's family, and that Karakas's wife and children had stayed there after his death. The historian also recalled a wedding procession in Istanbul, though he couldn't confirm whether there had been an earlier ceremony in Bodrum, as Kemal had stated. Kyle attempted to secure documentary confirmation of these accounts, but faced significant obstacles. Records of the Armenian church had been lost in a fire in 1957, eliminating any possibility of finding marriage or funeral records. A search through newspapers published at the time of Karakas's death yielded no references to him, as news in the early 1940s was dominated by war events. Some of Kemal's statements remained partially verified or unverifiable. While it seemed likely that Karakas's wife and children had Greek first names given her Greek Orthodox background, Kyle couldn't learn their actual names. The name fustuk is a Turkish word meaning pistachio, often used colloquially to refer to someone considered sweet or charming. Although no one could specifically recall Karakas being called by this name, it aligned with what Kyle had learned about his personality and may have been an affectionate nickname used informally within the community. The claim that Karakas knew Ayşegül initially seemed unlikely given their respective dates, but Kyle discovered that Ayşegül had lived in the house next to Karakas as a child, making it possible that Karakas might have known her then. The statement about his youngest son dying as a rally car driver appeared chronologically impossible based on the timeline suggested by the historian, as Karakas's son would have been too young when Karakas was murdered. When Kyle returned to share his findings with Kemal, the boy was 8 years old. He showed Kemal a photograph of Karakas's house taken from across the Bosphorus. Kemal was struck by the picture and believed he could identify his room in the house. However, by this age, he had begun to forget details he had recalled earlier and didn't respond to any of the new facts about Caracas that Kyle had uncovered. The case presented several unusual features that distinguished it from typical reincarnation cases studied by Ian Stevenson, whose investigative methodology Kyle was following. The distance between Istanbul and Hatay was approximately 850 kilometres, far exceeding the median distance of 14 kilometres found in Stevenson's large case collection. Only a few cases involved distances greater than 500 kilometres. Even more remarkable was the 50-year interval between Caracas's death in 1940 or 1941 and Kemal's birth in 1991. This far exceeded the median intermission of 16 months in Stevenson's global collection and the 8.5-month median found specifically in Alevi cases. Such a long time gap, combined with the considerable distance, made it highly unlikely that Kemal or his parents could have learned about Caracas through normal means such as overhearing conversations or encountering people familiar with his story. The case attracted critical analysis from researcher Vitor Visoni, who raised several methodological concerns. He questioned the role of Kyle's interpreter, who had introduced the case and knew the family, suggesting a possibility of collusion. He also criticised the constant presence of Kemal's mother during the interview and the lack of audio or video recording. Visoni suggested that verification should have been carried out by an independent investigator with no knowledge of Kemal's statements, and that recognition tests should have been more rigorous. Kyle and his colleague, Jim B. Tucker, who later summarised the case in his book Life Before Life, responded to these criticisms. They pointed out that Kemal's mother couldn't have fed him information she didn't possess, that an investigator unfamiliar with the claims wouldn't know what to verify, and that by age 8, when Kyle returned with his findings, Kamal's fading memories made elaborate recognition tests impractical. Despite these methodological debates, even Visoni acknowledged that Kemal's case remained evidentially strong. The prior written record of statements, the significant geographical and temporal distance between the two lives, and the specific verifiable details that proved accurate all contributed to making this one of the more compelling cases in reincarnation research. The case of Kemal Atasoy stands as a remarkable example of claimed past life memories, notable not only for its specific and verified details, but also for the challenges it poses to conventional explanations. In that empty house by the Bosphorus in Çengelköy, next to where Ayşegül once lived, the residual traces of Caracas's life had all but vanished. The Armenian community dispersed, church records burned, newspapers silent about his death. Yet somehow, 50 years and 850 kilometres away, a 6-year-old boy in Hatay could describe the boats at the water's edge, the 3-storey house, the Greek Orthodox church behind it, and the leather bag of a man whose very existence had nearly been erased from living memory.